COVID-19 crisis in Africa, what role for trade and digital policies? My name is Viridiana Garcia. I worked at UNCTAD. And before handing over the floor to the speakers and the moderator, I would like to take a quick moment to point you to the tools available during this webinar. So you can find the main menu of WebEx when you hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen. From there, you can open the list of participants and the chat section. You can find the Q&A in the bottom right corner of your screen. There are two ways you can communicate with us and among yourselves during the session. If you would like to address a question to the moderator or the speakers, please use the Q&A function and send your question to either all panelists or our special Q&A moderators today, myself, Viridiana, or Sabrina. Please indicate if the message or your question is directed to one of the speakers, if relevant. You can use the chat function for any technical questions or for sharing information and comments with all attendees. I will now hand over the floor to the moderator of this session, Mrs. Shamika Sirimani. As the director of the Division on Technology and Logistics at UNCTAD, Mrs. Sirimani leads UNCTAD's work on science, technology, and innovation, including e-commerce and the digital economy, and she will moderate this high-level discussion. Let me just unshare my screen. And Shamika, you have the floor.
Thank you, Viri. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. I see a large number of you are attending the session, so this is very good. And it is my pleasure to moderate this high-level live session. For UNCTAD, this eWeek is an effort to ensure that we can continue the global dialogue on how to leverage e-commerce and the digital economy for more inclusive and sustainable development. In fact, this is the preoccupation of my division and UNCTAD. We want to see how this technology can be made more inclusive and how it can benefit all. For example, these webinars are just a good illustration of how digital technologies can be used to have a collective and broad-based dialogue on how to deal with this global pandemic that we are facing now. This session will consider the role of trade and digital policies in dealing with the economic fallout of the current pandemic. I think this is a big issue for all of us, is the health crisis now transmitted into an economic crisis. While the focus will be on Africa, this dialogue will be highly relevant for all developing countries because we are all in the same boat. Now, let me share some of the critical issues that we hope to address in the next 85 minutes. Number one, the role of multilateral responses to the ongoing pandemic and its impacts. How to ensure that ships can keep moving, ports be open, and cross-border trade flows despite the pandemic. The role of digital technologies during and after the crisis, not least in view of existing aspirations in many developing countries to go digital. And then we also want to know how the international community in partnerships with other stakeholders can support the creation of more resilient economies in a digital era. I know that these are big questions and really profound questions, but we have only 90 minutes. But the good thing is we have here very eminent speakers to lead this discussion. We will hear from UNCTAD Secretary General Dr. Mukisa Kitui, and we have Ms. Clarice Iribagisa, founder and CEO of Hehe Labs in Rwanda. Clarice is one of the 7 e-trade women advocates of UNCTAD. Her company is the largest e-commerce business in Rwanda, digitizing over 150 businesses, and 60% of which are female-led and the company is serving 2 million consumers. Now we are also expecting His Excellency Mr. Wamkele Mene, the first Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, and Dr. Eleni Gabremadine. She's the founder and CEO of Blue Moon, Ethiopia. And Blue Moon is an incubator for young African entrepreneurs in agribusiness. So the last two speakers, I think I'm still having difficulties connecting, but hopefully we will see them online pretty soon. So a very big welcome to our panel. Before handing over to Dr. Kitui, let me encourage all participants to take active part in the dialogue, and I see the numbers increasing exponentially, the participant list. And feel free to use the chat function to share information and make comments. And Viri just explained to you how to use the Q&A function. And at one point, we will read out the questions to allow the speakers to respond. And just, I want to say that we are going to do our best to cover the ground as well as we can. But I'll ask for your understanding if we are unable to address all the questions within the time allotted. So, without further ado, I would like now to hand over to UNCTAD Secretary General Dr. Kitui for his opening remarks to set the scene. Over to you, SG.
Well, thank you very much, Shamika, Viridiana, panelists, ladies and gentlemen around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. On behalf of UNCTAD, I want to bid you also welcome to the 2020 edition of our eWeek. As already explained, these unique circumstances of a virtual conference have been imposed on us by a pandemic that is ravaging the world. And notwithstanding this disembodied version of having a conference, our very subject, our very discipline is supposed to prepare us better than most to be able to execute this exercise from a distance. I want, on behalf of organization, to express our hope that we will detain your attention through the period of these deliberations as we share together the challenges we face and how to cope with them and the opportunities that these challenges pose for many developing countries. I want also to encourage participation by all the persons in the different sessions as a very, very mutually enriching experience for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the world is rapidly striving to cope with the challenges of the pandemic that started a few months ago. We, as part of the United Nations, are following closely the ongoing health, economic, and social consequences, impacts of this phenomenon. We are seeing the ravages and the threat of trading off, particularly for developing countries, challenges to life and livelihood. While many have the stimuli to deal with these challenges, the options available to many developing countries are limited. In a recent webinar, I did mention that for many in the developing world, the fact of being poor is a pre-existing condition, and it predisposes you to more vulnerability, just like a person who is advanced in age and has other biological infirmities. I also wish to restate our commitment as the United Nations that the global challenge before us requires global solutions, and we continue to be committed to collectively addressing the challenge, not just because we have solidarity across the board, but because of the reality of the pandemic, that if one country has ridden out the virus and it exists in another country, it will come back to haunt those who have been first by the post. So it is not altruistic, it's in self-interest that everybody extends their hand to partner with others around the world. We at UNCTAD have been particularly active in quantifying declines in foreign direct investment, the hemorrhage of investable capital because of capital flight, particularly from portfolio investors, the disruption of export trade, the debasing not only of currencies, but the asset value in countries where foreign investment has been drawn rapidly. And we put this at the disposal of others as we enrich the discussion on how to deal with the short-term and long-term consequences. But you all know that in spite of this challenge, we should say we are a bit lucky historically. You just look at if this phenomenon had happened 10 years ago, the very medium of webcasting conferences, whether it is Zoom or WebEx or Java or Skype for business, it would have been very, very difficult. Today we have all these avenues. We are living at a time when global internet access in the last decade alone has increased from 1.6 to 4.1 billion human beings. When Facebook membership has increased from 100 million to 2.4 billion. Where B2C commerce has increased more than 3 times from in a short period. In fact, 4 times, from 1 trillion to about $4 trillion. So the base is very significant. The possibilities of the internet is very significant. But that doesn't take away from the reality that many parts of the world have very unequal access to these benefits. In fact, if you look at the tools available at the disposal of governments in the developing world, is when you see how unequal we are. Those without adequate quality broadband access, those without a payment system, those without the technical backup and skills to facilitate this enterprise and services from the internet are being left behind by the pandemic and hit harder than others. We will see how we can build on this the narrative that digital inclusion is almost a human right going forward, particularly given that after this conference, after this pandemic, we will never be able to go back again. But let me leave that to the discussions of the rich panel that is before us. I just want to express our appreciation to the partners who have organized this with us, the co-founders of the E-Trade for All initiative, which we at UNCTAD have been hosting for the past 4 years, have walked this path with us, and many of them are participating in this conference. Similarly, I want to express my appreciation to my staff, the staff of the Division of Technology and Logistics under Shamika, for your gallant performance, and I very much look forward to a very successful conference. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Esther. I think you really set the stage well, and I think you talked about global challenges that need global solutions. And one of the takeaways, and how I want to bridge this to Clarice now, is to say you said that this is a period of rapid digitization, things we have never seen 10 years ago, but this growth has been rather uneven. We know the numbers, only 1 in 5 people in LDCs are connected to internet, and that's the reality on the ground. So Clarice, you are our distinguished founder and CEO, one of our 7 E-Trade for Women advocates, and we really value the work that you have been doing with us. So tell us a bit more about your business and whether you have already experienced direct impacts of COVID-19 on your business operations. And which actions have you taken to adapt to these impacts, and what's out there, what's going on, and in the private sector, in the SMEs, in where when people are trying to make a living out of being small enterprises. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Shamika, and thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to share more on what we're doing as a business. Like you rightly said, Hehe is one of the largest, actually is the largest e-commerce player in Rwanda. And really what our focus is supply chain digitization from end to end. And with what we're dealing with the pandemic right now, we've definitely seen, first of all, disruptions in supply chains for a lot of businesses that we're getting online. First of all, disruptions in supply chains have created a lot of shortage, access to goods and services, essential goods for consumers online. And right now, what we've seen is a lot of challenges for businesses just to be able to keep operating. And we've tried to mitigate this by quickly trying to get businesses online. And initially, how we operated as a business was we have an online marketplace, but we also enable small and medium-sized enterprises to digitize their operations, have access to digital payments and other types of tools along the supply chain. And we also do focus on the agriculture supply chain as well, which was one of the most disrupted in the context in Kigali, Rwanda, where we saw a shortage in food supplies, as well as panic buying, of course, as people were trying to stock up with the lockdown that was ongoing. So to mitigate this, we've tried to combine both offline and online tools to enable businesses to get online. We've partnered with the government of Rwanda and other private sector players to basically increase trust for online services. And there was actually an official communique from the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of ICT, the Private Sector Federation, just listing a number of e-commerce businesses that consumers could actually go online and buy from. Because there was a lot of mistrust, obviously, these tools being new for a lot of people. So just trying to build that trust, but also enabling businesses to get online, working with farmers and from the first mile, a combination, like I said, of offline and online tools, just to enable these supply chains to remain secure so we can ship essential goods, food from the farms to the table. So there's been a lot of efforts that we've put in place just to mitigate that. And I could speak more to that, but we've seen over 20% growth in online usage alone for e-commerce shopping. We've also seen basically over 150% growth in the gross merchandise value for goods that people have been buying online, which is good news for us. And it's good news for anyone that is involved in trying to digitize trade on the continent and in the world. But obviously, there's still a number of challenges that we need to address, challenges in logistics, the supply chains that we need to continuously ensure that they are efficient. So we're definitely in a catalyzed phase of digital trade. That's what I would call it. But there are a lot of positive things that have come out of it and innovative solutions from a lot of young entrepreneurs here in Rwanda and across the continent, trying to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clarice. You raised a very important point. You said, yes, the e-commerce numbers have gone up, but to sustain this after the COVID-19 kind of situation, there are many things that need to be in place. And you talk about efficient logistics. Would you want to expand a bit? Because we also want to hear, especially in my division, I also do logistics. So we would like to hear what are these logistical barriers you have and how do you overcome them?
Thank you very much, Shamika. With what we are facing, I'll just speak from our context. Of course, we see challenges like the cost of the final good being as high. When you look at the final cost of a good, basically the cost goes up by probably around 300% when we're even talking about basic things like agriculture produce, simply because of supply chain inefficiencies. And this is actually an area that, as Hehe, we've been trying to address with different types of solutions. And obviously with the effects of COVID-19, where we're not able to move as freely as we had initially done, we've seen much greater challenges. Post-harvest losses have obviously skyrocketed from about 60% to maybe about 80% right now with some of the farmers that we're working with, even as we try to mitigate these challenges. But we're looking at different types of solutions. How can we create on-demand logistics services, fleet on demand, to be able to transport goods from the first mile to the last? How can we connect, the first mile to the last mile in terms of all the players within these supply chains, whether it's warehousing service providers, fleet service providers? These are some of the solutions that, as DMM Hehe, we're trying to come up with, and even going as far as trying to predict the demand with geospatial data and predicting what the harvest is going to look like, so we can plan efficiently and be more forward-looking in our supply chains. very exciting things that we're trying to do, very, very challenging given some of the barriers that we have, but we are optimistic that we'll be able to at least put a dent in some of these challenges.
Thank you very much, Clarice. So this, I think, gives me a good opportunity to now reach out to Dr. Eleni Gabremadine, and I see that she has joined us, so this is very good. As I mentioned earlier to all of you, that she is the CEO of Blue Moon, and Blue Moon discovers, nurtures, and funds exceptional agribusiness ideas that are innovative, scalable, and have transformational potential. So Dr. Gabremadine, very welcome, a big welcome to this panel. I just want to take you from what Clarice was talking about. She talked a lot about the impact of farmers and agribusinesses. So tell us from your own perspective and from your initiative that you manage, because you focus on identifying innovative agribusiness startups to support their development and help them grow. How do you see that such businesses are being affected by the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic? And to what extent can they also be part of a solution? So please, over to you. I cannot hear you. I see you're present. Really, any luck?
Ask her to unmute her microphone, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're, yeah. Dr. Gabremadine, I think your mic is on mute. Would you please unmute? I see her on my screen as a participant, as if she's there.
You can come back to her.
Yeah, I think we lost her for a little while. So Esti, let me get back to you. You see, I think this is you have been, out there, this COVID-19, and talking about trade and digital policies and what countries need to do, not just to prepare for this oncoming episode, but also to build resilience to the shocks that may come our way. So tell us, what is your take on the current situation in Africa, and what kind of responses would you like to see from both national governments and from international community, including us in UNCTAD?
Okay, thank you very much. The first and most immediate phase of the challenge is a health challenge. Luckily for much of Africa, the phase of the picking up of infections and death has not yet hit any part of the continent. But this